This meeting is being recorded.
Sure. Hi, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are listening to. My name is Gaurav Sharma, and I work with the German Development Corporation in a project called Fair Forward AI for All. And this presentation, I present my personal opinions. This is not related to the company. This is my own experience in AI and social impact sectors. And I will talk about the opportunities and risks. And some of this you might have already heard, but the presentation is looking at the wider aspects also from a global south perspective in Asia and Africa, and also looking at some of the uh, unheard or untalked about issues which are very uh, rooted in the grassroots level, or also linked to the vulnerable and the marginalized communities. So the agenda is very simple. I give an introduction, a brief, the opportunities with some examples, the challenges and the highlights, and then trying to see how we can bridge the gap and the future of AI in the social impact space. So as an overview of the, we say that AI has come in, and it's all, I think you have heard it before, because it's the transformative nature from a large language model perspective, which are called generative AI in general, that the AI use thinking has evolved in the social uh, impact space. It has already been there in bigger sectors like banking and insurance, which had used AI before as well. But now with the evolution of the large language models and the portability and the improvements in the compute, there has been an influx of utilizing the power of AI for solving the grand global challenges. And most of these challenges actually stay within the realm of social sectors, whether it is education, healthcare, urban development, or it is linked to climate change, such as disaster management and predictive modeling for weather forecasting for acute climate events. And that's where the power of AI is being truly looked at for a greater global good. And that's where there is this talk. And I think I just want to highlight that it's a dual nature of AI, where a lot of people are talking about these positive impact, but then there are also careful considerations need to be made on the challenges or the risks, which is pertaining to these discussions. Coming on to the opportunities, I think generally, if you look at where AI is being deployed and what is the intention of these AI models or these large language models, is to improve efficiency and automation at larger, to have less wastage. Then there is data analysis for decision making, for faster actions with more viability and more trust in taking these decisions. And then there is, of course, sectorially, then there is improved healthcare processes, last mile connectivity, education, which is also linked to accessibility of education. And these are mostly pertaining to, if we talk about the global south, the issues are so big and large that a potential capacity development in these sectors, in the way it used to happen, the technology will enable this at a faster rate, and that's where the premise lies. And in that sense, again, the two topics which I have listed last pertain to climate action, and it is environmental sustainability and disaster response and humanitarian aid. These is more to know exact knowledge of who needs what, where, and how this can be delivered effectively. So I come to the role which I had mentioned in my initial remarks. It's so the ethos is always to use AI for social good, right? So nobody's trying to pertain and say, oh, we come to this market to get to leverage its profits now, right? Every, at least in the governance sense of countries like in the global south, in the ethos from the government and from the utilization of AI is for social good, and that it does have a potential, and it has shown the potential of doing this, right? And the risks of AI adoption in terms of integration uh, are also being highlighted in the sense of personal data, in the sense of ethical concerns of data collection, data processing, data governance, data ownership. And there is, of course, a bias because as of now, the fundamentals of large language models or generative AI models are largely active in the realm of the global north data sets, because that's where the internet penetration is, that's where the social media is, and that's where the whole, even the literature with good books and good archives is. In the south there are certain elements which are missing, and hence these risks do come up. And then the case studies will highlight some of the impact, which I will talk about later. So this is a SWOT analysis, which people think it's a business term, but you can also do, I mean, in a strength way, that when you look at it, there is a potential to revolutionize initiatives, because uh, even if you can give, for example, in healthcare, a very simple advisory: where do I have a vaccination camp? Or a simple pop-up that your child is 6 months old, and these are the vaccinations that you should get them done, rather than you being told in a small village or in a remote area, oh, cannot come here because we cannot. So it's like a information, uh, simple effectiveness of that information breakthrough. It's also an advisory breakthrough. It could also be a simple uh, you know estimating your weight and estimating your height for nutrition values. Those type of simple things are the strength where the utilization of these technology is being looked at. The opportunities actually scale up, because the numbers that we're talking about, even in the scale of India, would be something like an impact pool of 200 million. And so if you just compare the population size, it would be like, three-fourths the size of Europe's population being impacted. And that's where I think the opportunities lie. The weakness, of course, are in the ethical and the bias, and I think I'll dwell deep into it. And the threats also are, being posed as job displacement and economic inequity, because it's already a digitally unequal society, with the global 3 billion population not having access to internet, and most of these technologies are leveraging the power of internet. Yeah. So, in the healthcare accessibility, I think the diagnostics is one of the best and the most easiest of these solutions. If you do not have access to a doctor, if you do not have access to even a nurse or any type of physician in your vicinity, I think these diagnostic portable solutions imperatives. You wear a smartwatch on your hand, and you know your heartbeat and your other pulse rate and everything. And whereas these diagnostic analyses could be for diseases like cataract, which are which the different types of pneumonias, different types of tuberculosis which happen, and those could be being experimented. And all different demographics and geographics have different ways of doing it, but the first line of detection, the primary healthcare detection for diagnostic solutions, is something where these advancements are taking shape. The second important is the telemedicine advancements, remote healthcare advisory. Of course, these are better apprehended if you have a video call with a doctor who can see, view, and analyze your features of your eye, your throat, your things, and based on a preliminary analysis, give these some sort of advisory or some sort of next steps to you. And the challenge is actually rightfully said, is that the concerns about data privacy and patient's autonomy. So if you are looking at the poorest of the poor, and if you're taking this data, how you're processing data, who's keeping the data, when I think this whole digital literacy aspects about data are being talked deep into it, but that is one part of the story which we should look at. The environment sustainability, I brought this in between because I think there is a lot more talk about uh, big models, big compute, big energy requirements, and big environmental impact. Uh, but it's that the whole idea is that better climate modeling in terms of climate action is possible, because climate is the biggest data provider, and it's a dynamic environment where everything keeps changing every second. The pressure changes, the temperature changes, the wind speed changes, everything. And that type of mechanisms for predictive modeling were not there uh, within a localized city level or village level environment prediction. And that could be made possible with different topographies, different types of vegetation and everything for modeling. And that's where the disaster response is something which is requested, early warning systems. And trying to say this, like, when you can have a disaster response say 10 days before, it's much better than having it 3 days before. So I think those type of warning systems are required, so that better mechanisms could be taken shape. Of course, people uh, in cyclone prone or typhoon prone areas are always given advice 2 days 3 days back, and hence they are shifted. But it is also like, if you could map it for a 3 to 5 months period, that's something fantastic to really not take knee jerk reactions, but to actually have a planned position on this. And of course, in all this, I think the last component will always remain ethical use of data in general. So for anything that you talk about, you need to know what and how you are using these data sets. Education is something which is very important. Again, it actually has a parallel track to healthcare, because you could have you could lead education to people with disabilities. I think that's one of the biggest topic with a which is not evolved and touched upon very much. But I also believe that the personalized level of interactions, uh, of course, in a very simple way, using the language models in low resource languages, which are tail languages, just an access to primary education from class first standard to class fifth standard, where a simple analog phone could be utilized for basically giving simple mathematics problems and simple science problems, would be a very effective tool to to use. The second part is also on the remote learning support. Basic Again, the aspect is, you have a it's like a radio, and you have a corpus of data, and you have somebody to learn, but even ask questions and actually inquire and get some answers, or some learning support, as it is said, with limited education resources. And equity in education will actually happen if this primary level of education targets could be met, uh, at least with penetration of education components to these marginalized communities. uh, that's where the whole these three last 3 or 4 slides bring in the idea and bring in the concept of economic empowerment in general. So these are again big terms which I have listed out here: entrepreneurship support, job creation, inclusive economic growth. But even in a sense of opportunity creation, the entrepreneurship model is basically, if small businesses or smallholder farmers, or women's help groups and things, and people like that, or the marginalized communities, could even understand what are the types of opportunities that we have, that we can engage with the government, and how we can get access to it through digital funds, through these India is known for the unified payment systems, and also to get advisory on these, where to invest, how to save money, even if I have $1 or $2, where do I really put my money, how do I really invest in the education of my children, or building of my small market economy within a village. I think these are very simple advisories which could be provided. And that's where the job creation aspect is linked to it. So if you have one entrepreneur, it's always linked to like 10 job creations, right? And that's where that's a strong belief that the AI penetration would actually excite more localized communities job creation to take shape in a different way. And where there were no jobs, or there were limited jobs, it is a localized um, um, economic model that will flourish. And that's where I think it will lead into the inclusive economic growth. And that's where the idea of promoting the use of language models for a very use case specific intent in global south to solve some problems which are linked to job creation is also being looked at formidably by young minds. So now I have talked about the beautiful picture. Then let's talk about the risks. There are the three X's we can say. The responsible data governance and ethical developments and ethical implementation. I have given them X's because I do believe that there are these notions of data privacy and security. There's a responsible data use and data accessibility. But just to talk about these data privacy and security part, just to believe it, I think there is a robust uh, discussion which is happening and taking shape. But there is a second part of the story. The second part of the story is that uh, if you are looking to solve a use case problem in and by providing some good advisory which has been shown or shown by to a farmer or to a women's help group, and it has actually worked, and it has actually shown merit through a use of an AI tool or a service or a product, they are not shy in giving up their data. But it is the responsibility of the government and the state as a whole to actually look at the data privacy issues and make it transparent and accountable for the technology company, for the the open the model which is being used, and how this cascading effects of data feeding in and feeding out is being looked at for multiple other use cases, right? So maybe through one use case, you get data, and the similar data sets could be actually applied to another use case. So you might not need to collect data again, and these people are happy to use it. But where exactly are these benefits being flowed into the privacy and the security aspects? The second part is the responsible data use. I think I have interlinked these two in terms of ensuring that the misuse of these privacy data sets by some lone wolf or some bad actor which has portability and wants to incite some malicious activity, and these are as simple as credit card scams, right? And people used to get phone calls through some random people. Now if somebody calls and I'm still living in a big city, but if somebody calls my mother in my voice and says I need $200 and I'm stuck up in this situation, I think my mom will not really verify the situation of whose voice was it or why he was asking it, and she will just transfer the money, like something like this. And these deep fake problems are actually attuned not to the data part of it, but it is like the falsification of data towards these insights. And this in social sector where you're actually treating a very digitally unequal society, I think these data becomes apparently the most important in terms of its governance, in terms of its reuse, in terms of its accessibility and ownership. And that's where I think the because the masses are being impacted for very small schemes, even if it is access to subsidies, access to information on your voting rights and things like this. I think this will substantially create a social, I would say, typhoon if this is not being looked at. Yeah. Ethical AI development is where the ethical principles are being talked about, at least in the global north, very widely. The big organizations, the UN, are talking. The US is talking about it with the President's Charter. There is President's Order. Then the EU AI Act has come into play. And these are big terms, at least, but these are continental AI, ethical AI developments impact, which will actually facilitate some level of accountability. So at least on a global level, certain ethical AI principles by the OECD, by the UNESCO, have come into life, which talks very simple terms. But the idea of fairness and transparency and accountability is to make it really work. And how to make it work is not only through putting guardrails, but how do you put in checks and balances? And these are very use case specific. If it is in a transport industry, it is an agriculture industry, all regulators would require certain very special type of mechanisms, and that too in a use case basis. So these are not as simple to accommodate ethical principles. First, to actually align with these local ethical requirements. Third, I mean, second, to put in the diversity component in this all developmental talk. and where exactly all these areas of impact would be. And third, to take in the stakeholder engagement by talking to them what are their needs and requirements, and which should be ethically addressed in a potential initiative that you are looking at. So I think there is merit in ethical AI development, but having talked through it, I have still put it as an X, because the development, and now I come to the implementation part, right, of these ethics in terms of again the regulatory frameworks, the mitigating the bias, and bias has been talked through and through. Right, a lot to prevent discrimination and ensure equitable outcomes. But even randomly, you can keep seeing cases coming up as recently as Taylor Swift, right? And some, I mean, if this happens into the known names of the world, you can imagine what will happen in a underprivileged society where nobody knows how do I even report about it, or where do I put my grievances if something happens to me, right? So I think these are biggest challenges which are still open, and still have not been and they would need much more uh, sort of deliberations and effective impact full analysis for the Asia and Africa and Latin American societies, which are very diverse, both socially and culturally, and demand a better outlook in it. Okay, making it all work. Very good. I have just given it three simple examples of community engagement, collaborative ecosystems, and ethical advocacy. Uh, it's easy to say and hard to do, but the core of all AI development in terms of has to remain and should ask the question of what the community needs. Where exactly are they looking to address, and what are the unique needs? And it could be as simple as addressing a population of remote hilly region of pastures and which are say 10,000 strong living in the Himalayas. And it could be you could solve a problem through a very you could say participatory and inclusive nature of understanding their needs. And that's where the social impact will take shape, and will have a real time learning. Second is the local empowerment will happen, because uh, the higher component of education of organizations is to basically, when the communities become participatory, they also become activists, and they also become understanding when they see the benefits flow into their local communities. And it doesn't have to be monetary benefits, it could be just educational, knowledge, healthcare benefits being flown into a community for empowering it. And when they see this, the participation becomes better. So it has a vicious circle of good impact. And that's where it looks at the sustainability part of it. So once you have at least been able to prove one or two AI applications and practices which are leading into good family health, or good women's educations, or something to that effect, the sustainable local participation will actually keep flourishing on the go. And that has a long-term success story for AI's interventions in this area. The collaborative ecosystem is, yes, needed, because still there is a high cost of compute, specifically for investments in the hardware infrastructure. Most people should understand that the GPU costs are declining, but they're not as simple for crunching even the amount of climate data, for example, in a setting, say in I don't know, Sudan, or in Tanzania and things like this. So there has to be a huge requirement. There's a huge requirement for compute infrastructure to be set up, and that demands capacity building in people who can actually who know the nitty gritties of specialist domains, whether it is agriculture, education, and this, and intertwined with the community, and also have the power to develop. So developers, social scientists, there is this public participation which is required. And that's where I always look at it as a community engagement. It's a multidisciplinary approach. The public private partnerships are always looked at for there is always a need of funds, and it will always remain the way it is evolving. Maybe it takes, or takes a better route going forward, but as of now, still there is a huge demand for it. And again, measuring impact and matrix evaluation for effectiveness is something which is required by the government to actually take next decisive action. And impact needs to be measured in something which can be tangible, seen, analyzed, and also reasoned. And that's where the whole idea of a collaborative ecosystem to work in will mature. And one needs to be aware that the capacities in terms of resources within the government, within the private sector and public sector, are not that many experienced people in the block, even in the regulatory side of it. So even if you bring in a multi interdisciplinary team for one particular use case, say in agriculture and education, you need a sustenance mechanism so that these people are working on very specific problem sets on a long term basis to, till the time it really reaches its goal. Okay, advocacy, yes, and that's, I think, a larger overarching, maybe a top down and a bottom up approach. The top down approach is always in a sense that we need fairness, transparency, and accountability. But the bottom up approach is basically to look at the needs, requirements, and problems of the people who would be the end users, or who would actually be the data donors, or data contributors. And that's where the advocacy in public domain from the AI side should promote and protect the vulnerable communities, should have public awareness campaigns. Again, this is not short term, this is long term campaigning. This is, you can see the digital inequity in the world, and you are now layering a very high tech, impactful technology like AI. So the digital inequity to shrink and to bridge that gap is not easy. And empowering voices, amplifying voices of marginalized communities is the way, where you listen to NGOs, where you listen to activists, and you listen to what people are at least asking for, and devise a solution in and around that. I mean, we have seen a lot of chatbots showcasing the same power of solving your problems and finding it. But what exactly and where people do need this applicability, and how, I think that's where the advocacy aspect needs to widen up. Okay, where do I see the future proofing of AI? So anticipating future challenges, it's maybe a little bit of a, good English being used here, but proactively identifying and addressing future potential risk has already been highlighted as of now. So if you have to have inclusivity and equal participation, just equal participation on men and women and other gender in itself is something, and people with disabilities, it itself a future proofing of any application or any practices. And the thing is, there has to be some adaptation in an agile manner, which keeps evolving as the technology gets implemented and gets tested in a very particular environment. And that's also where the idea of sandboxes and the AI sandboxes, where you can at least have some leeway space to play around both with regulation as well as with bias and discrimination, and see how good it is performing, at least in a limited environments with everybody's consent, because it's a limited environment for testing the applications. And then there is a global collaboration. I think the global collaboration is already happening and taking shape. At least the UN and the OECD and the EU and the now the GPI, India has a presidency of a global partnership on AI. I think mandating similar voices and similar tones in maximizing the AI for positive social impact is coming out very openly. And it does demand, there at least that voice is common. What we need to do, how it really happens, maybe in the next 1 year or 2 years, it will take shape. And lastly, but most importantly, building trust. I think most of these things that we talk on a global scale demand a level of trust within the community and social ecosystem that we work with, and that can come with transparency and more explainability. And many of us know that generative AI is not so transparent and not so explainable. The community education on AI as a tool and a practice, the accountability of these tools, and the accountability of AI in general, and of course, most important is user engagement, people who would actually be using these applications. So I thank you all for your listening, and I also my Gmail ID, which is easy. And thank you for your time.